one thing you'll be doing more of, and probably more than you thought of, and will almost certainly be much more challenging than you thought, is reading. You might be asked to read an article in preparation for a lecture, or you might have to do a bunch of reading around when you write an essay. Some reading you'll be given by your lecturers, and other material you'll have to find yourself. So this video covers something about what kind of material you should be looking for, how to go about locating potentially useful material, and a few tips for getting through the kind of reading that you'll need to do. So again, let's start with a question. When you were studying music at school or college, what kind of material did you have to read for your course? So press pause on the video and make a couple of notes about that. And again, I don't know exactly what you've written, but I would imagine that one or two of the following pretty much fits. More or less nothing, maybe a few software manuals. Whatever handouts the teacher gave us in class. Some bits of textbooks, maybe Grove Dictionary of Music or the Groughton Palaska History of Western Music, something along those lines. Or whatever I could find through Google, music websites, Wikipedia, that sort of thing. Now what university work needs is something really quite different. For a start, you'll definitely need to read something, more than just manuals, so the first one won't apply. Second, although you might get some handouts in class, they certainly won't be the full extent of everything that you need to read. There's quite a lot more to it. And although the textbooks are still alright as reference tools, and they work as starting points, you need to understand that the study of music involves a good deal of debate. Uncertainties, new interpretations, new theories and differences of opinion, and all of that means that dictionaries and books that say they're a history of don't really go very far. They act like they're giving you facts, and we're operating in a place where facts and interpretation are both important. And finally, while Google is a great search engine, the internet holds information of enormously variable quality and reliability, and a huge amount of what you've come across so far won't have been written from or for the kind of academic world that you're now part of. So a good deal of what you're going to be reading from here on falls into one of three different categories. First, there are books or monographs written by academics. These will be in-depth studies of a particular aspect of music, musical cultures, musical practices or musical histories. They're usually written by a single author. They're put together with reference to other work written about the topic, so they're rigorously constructed, and they're reviewed by other academics before they're published, so you know they're not completely off the wall. They're not like school textbooks though, because they're not about packaging up existing knowledge for teaching. Instead, they're major works of new ideas about the subject. Then there are articles. Again, these would be written by academics. These aren't like news articles or blog entries. They get published in journals, and journals aren't like diaries. They're regular publications of collections of these articles. And a journal would have a very broad theme for everything it publishes. So there's, for instance, the Journal of Popular Music History, or the Journal of Music, Sound and the Moving Image. There's Music Analysis. And they get published several times a year, one issue every few months, and those issues make up a volume, one volume per year. Articles are generally anywhere between 6,000 and 15,000 words, so they're much more focused and limited than books. But like books, articles are usually reviewed before publication, and almost always anonymously. And then there are chapters in edited books. These are a bit like articles. The chapters are focused in on something quite particular. They tend to be about 7,000 to 10,000 words. But the book is a very specific collection of these essays put together by one or more academics as editors on behalf of a book publisher. Usually the editors do the reviewing work, so it's not anonymous, but it is still academically informed. Sometimes another anonymous academic reader also looks at the collection before it's published, and certainly a reader looks at the idea and a summary of the collection before it gets a contract. Some of these materials are available electronically. There are places online like JSTOR where journal articles get held, or there are e-books, and you can access them via the library website. But all of these are really different from news articles or textbooks because of who they're written for, who they're written by, and the level of detail in the argument. So apart from what you're given to read for class, how do you find the right stuff to read? The easiest answer is to go to the library website, put your search terms in, and see if there's a book in there on what you want. But that doesn't always turn up quite enough, and sometimes it turns up too much. So how do you broaden out or narrow down and find the material that you need? You need to do three things. First, choose good search terms. Second, choose good search options. And third, search in good places. Go beyond the obvious places to look. Let's say you've got an essay question. Is Mozart's The Magic Flute a highbrow or a lowbrow opera? The keywords are obvious enough. Mozart, highbrow, lowbrow, magic flute, and opera. And typing those in various combinations into your search engine is a place to start. But it won't find all the stuff that you need because you're more or less looking for what's been written exactly on the subject before. And that's useful, but you need to do it right, and it's not the only thing to do. You need to find existing work on the subject and also find a bigger picture. And one useful way to balance that is by setting up a search terms grid. So try this. Here we've got the terms. Let's put highbrow and lowbrow in the same box because they're about the same thing. They're about the cultural value of the opera. And let's put magic flute underneath opera because it is, after all, an opera. But then in each column you can write down synonyms and related concepts. So Mozart is a fairly obvious place to start. But what about Schikaneder, the librettist? Or what about other Austro-German composers of opera in the 18th century? Highbrow and lowbrow get you thinking about value, or art versus popular, or aesthetics. And thinking about that as being about how the opera is viewed, you might also search for reception, or reviews. In relation to opera, you could think about particular elements, such as libretto, or particular genres such as Singspiel, of which magic flute is one, and its relation to other genres like opera buffa or opera seria. And let's not forget that magic flute is the English translation of Die Zauberflöte, so include that too, remembering to spell it right, of course. There's a few other things that you can do with search terms once you've generated them all. One thing is to use wildcards, either within a word or to indicate the end of words. So for instance, an asterisk allows you to search for multiple endings. So opera asterisk gets you opera, operas, operatic, operation, and so on, all in one search. A question mark usually gets you multiple letters, which is really useful for certain plurals and UK-US spelling differences. So woman with a question mark in would get you woman and women and alternative spellings of women. You can also use quotation marks to mark whole phrases, so magic flute in quotation marks is really different from magic flute as two separate words. So now try searching for all of those terms in various combinations in your search engine with relevant quotation marks and wildcards, and it might generate slightly different material. It should get you most of what's been written before, and it might start broadening out your reading list to something a little bit more contextual as well. Sometimes, depending on your search terms or the subject matter you're writing about, your search produces far too many results to be useful. So how do you make sure that you get really relevant material in your search? The most important thing to understand about any search engine, Google or otherwise, is how you can filter what you search for. Some databases have really easy filter systems like publication date or language, and both of those are really useful when thinking about an 18th century German opera, for instance. So let's see how Discover, the library's search engine, allows you to filter these things. Let's try searching for Mozart, magic, flute, and see what happens. So there we are. There are well over 1,000 results, and that's clearly far too many to be wading through. But here on the left-hand side are a few really useful ways of filtering. So for starters, let's check the language, and let's make sure we've only got English results. Already that takes us down to 649. Then let's have a think about what type of source we want. We don't necessarily want all of these, so let's see what options are available. We definitely want journals, we definitely want books, and that might be about it. Maybe we don't want biographies or news articles, so let's update that. And that takes us down to 201. Another thing we can do is change the publication date range. So let's say we only want things from the last 30 years. And that takes us down to 171. And that, remember, has cut out over 1,000 results that we didn't necessarily want. The other kind of filtering that many databases support is Boolean searching, either through Boolean commands in your search query or through an advanced search option. Boolean searching makes your search like different bits of a Venn diagram. You use commands like and, not, and or to narrow or expand your search accordingly. So for instance, reception and Mozart and opera gets you only results that fit all queries. Reception or Mozart or opera would get you results that fit any query. Reception or opera, not Mozart, would get you things that fit into the first two categories, but not the last one. And not can be particularly useful if a word can be used in two different contexts, or if a wildcard might generate something irrelevant, like opera asterisk gets you operation, which you probably don't want for this particular essay. And you can combine all of these with wildcards, quotation marks, and also often brackets, which package off little subunits of a search, like when you use them in maths. Then you can make really focused searches. So for instance, Mozart and opera asterisk, not operation, and highbrow or lowbrow might be a really good place to start. So you've got a good bunch of search terms. What are you actually going to do with them? Where are you going to use these terms to actually search for the reading? Well, sure, Google's a good place to start, but let's think a bit smarter than that. You might know about Google Books, which searches just books, funnily enough. But there's also Google Scholar, and that searches books and scholarly articles, so it's instantly more focused than regular Google, and it's broader than Google Books. There's also the library catalogue, although that tends to search titles of books or titles of journals without necessarily looking at articles or chapters within them. Better still is Discover, which you saw a little bit of earlier. That searches a really wide range of the right sort of material, including article titles and chapter titles, and it links to whether or not it's available through the library. There are also specific databases that you can find through the LibGuides site on the library website. For music in particular, you might want to try RILM, the Répertoire International de Littérature Musicale. And it houses abstracts and summaries of articles, chapters and books, so you can see easily whether something's relevant, and it also has links to some of that material online. But what if you're still struggling to find something that's really useful? This is where you look beyond the obvious places. First up, try seeing what's nearby what you found that's nearly right. Physically stand and look at the shelves. It seems obvious, but what's shelved together is similar in topic, and it might not have come up on the searches that you've done. If you're not in the library, you can use the class number to do the same thing virtually. Since the class number tells you where to find the book, by clicking the class number in the library record, you find other things with the same or neighbouring class numbers. You can also see what else the author has written. Do a search for their name in one of your databases because they might have written other material about the same topic. Finally, you can follow up the footnotes, endnotes, and bibliographies in anything that you have found. What have those authors used that might be useful to you? Perhaps a particular chapter is mostly useful because of some other thing that the author quotes. So go and find that thing by looking up the sources that they used. And then you can use the same strategies, looking on the shelves to see what else is nearby, searching for the same authors, and so on, until you found everything that you really need for your essay. One of the most common challenges that students face in the first few months of studying at university is dealing with the kind of material that they need to read. Long words, long sentences, difficult concepts, presumption of existing knowledge, it's right in at the deep end. The first thing to know is that everyone finds it a challenge, and that should be of some small comfort in itself. You're not the only one at all. It doesn't mean you can't do it, or you're not up to it. It just means that what you're doing now is way different from what you were doing before. So for starters, just trust that if you keep doing the reading, then the new language starts to make more sense. Gradually you start recognising words and understanding the concepts, and you know some of the things that the authors presume you do. So keep turning the pages, that's absolutely key, and even if this one doesn't make sense, the next one will be easier, and the one after that easier again. But in the meantime, there are ways of reading that help you along too. For instance, if I said, read this article, I imagine you'd start at the beginning, work your way through, and finish at the end. Or also, quite possibly, get so distracted by looking up words and rereading difficult passages that you didn't finish. So my best advice as to how to make it easier to read from the beginning all the way through to the end is this. Think of it like a road trip. I once drove all the way from Liverpool to Aberdeenshire with the sat-nav directing me, but without knowing where the end point of my journey was. It was a birthday surprise, and my wife doesn't drive. It was probably the most unnerving journey I think I've ever gone on. Not knowing what it was I was looking out for, where I was going, meant I was on hyper alert to lots of irrelevant details. So, with the reading, you need to plan your trip. On your first read-through, read the first paragraph and then read the last paragraph, and you'll instantly know something of the journey, where you're going from and where you're going to. and then read the first sentence, just the first sentence, of every paragraph in between. And that shows you your route. It's a bit like saying, I'm going up the M6 towards Glasgow, across on the M74, down the A9, and so on. Once you've done that, then read the whole thing, but don't let yourself stop to look anything up. You can write a list of all the words and concepts that you need to look up, but for now, just keep going. Then spend a bit of time looking up those words, maybe put them in the context of the sentence that you read them in. But only when you've done all of that, looked up everything you've made notes about, only then do you read the whole thing properly, and that is effectively your journey. Still, it might be tricky, but keep going, keep turning the pages, and trust me, it does get easier. So before the next lecture, I want you to try putting into practice some of the things from this video. Put together a list of relevant books, whether they're single-authored monographs or edited collections, some journal articles and chapters in edited books, all on the subject of the history of notation. Make sure to try and use all of the strategies, choosing good search terms, good search options, and different places to search, and you can download a checklist from Vital to make sure that you go through each stage. Then write all the results of that up in your learning journal on Vital. Well, that's me done for now. I'll see you next time.